Good afternoon to you all. Thank you very much for being here today with us. It's a great pleasure for me. I'm Pedro Vigneau from Argentina. I'm the president of the National Value Corn Chain, and we will be speaking today here about biotechnology with three experts. John Linder is director of MAIZALL, chairman of the board of the National Corn Growers Association, Ohio, USA. Really pleased to be here with you, John, today. Othon Abrahão is director of biotechnology of CropLife Brazil. And we also have Ambassador Carlos Marcio Cozendey. He's Brazilian delegate to the International Economic Organization, Brazilian Embassy in France, Paris. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for being with us today as well. At a global level, biotechnology provides powerful instruments to a sustainable development in agriculture, fishery, and forestry. It also allows for a better management of the health of our planet. The following panelists will discuss how biotechnology is contributing to different stages of production in agriculture, offering means of genetic improvement, higher efficiency, and safe implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. So, John, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you. Really glad to be here with you all. Thanks for sitting in on this session. Really, it's an honor and privilege to be here from the United States and Brazil for this wonderful forum. So, when I do get my slides up, we will talk a little bit about history, and I'll just share with you, I'm going to have some data that is from 1980 to 2015 toward the end there. That's kind of an interesting period for me because I came back to the farm in 1980, and I can tell you everything we did was conventional, and there really weren't traits. We only had genetics. So it was a matter of crop protection tools that we had to manage the risk and the plant health. And I was never so glad to have the introduction of biotechnology in our corn seed as we planted, because the opportunity for us to not have to apply insecticides with the planter and worry about rescue as much, it was very meaningful to my operation. And I probably underestimated, I thought it was a convenience, but I probably underestimated its ability to produce gain on the farm and economic value. I just knew personally my health risk would be much less as we move forward. So I am John Linder. I'm the chairman of the board of directors at the National Corn Growers and the new MAIZALL director from the U.S. Edison, Ohio, that's about in the middle of the state for any of you that care to look it up on the map or have any reference to that. This is just a photo from an airplane as a friend was flying over. He sent me that photo, and I really, really appreciate it. Thought you might as well. So, as I stated, in 1980, everything was conventional. The corn, the beans, the wheat, we worked the ground and did our seeding. But since the adoption of biotechnology into our seed stream, we were early adopters in that. And what you see here in the next couple of slides will be just some examples of the way that we seed our corn. I really like planting corn. I really like raising corn. It's a great commodity for us. So the left-hand photo is fall strip tillage, only working about 6.5 inches deep in 30-inch bands and putting fertilizer in that band and in that strip as well. Then you see on the right, we'll come back in the spring and we'll plant over top of those strips. So we'll not only have the benefit of the fall fertilization that we put in, but we also carry fertilizer on the planter for starter and early plant development. So most of our fertilizer, we really strive on the farm to put it subsurface. So if there's major rain events, the soil moves, takes nutrients with it. We do everything we can to mitigate that soil movement. But, you can't always be successful with some of these larger rain events we've been having. So strip tilling is something that we really feel is a good fit. But we have highly erodible soils by our USDA's definition, where the slopes in the soil type suggest the soil will move. So we won't strip till those in the fall. We may do some in the spring if they can be well managed. But if we put those strips in the fall, we'd have gullies every 30 inches in places of field. So we don't do that everywhere. So some of what we've been working toward in that is cover crops. And you see on the left-hand slide, we're planting green, I'm calling it, into a cover crop. So that crop is still live. That cover is still live. That is a particular rye variety that we chose. And we do have success with that. It works good to a point. Sometimes these symbiotic relationships between plants causes us to choose a different cover crop. So we've gone from rye, which works in soybeans, to wheat and the corn because they seem to get along better and don't have the issues with emergence that we had with rye. The middle photo is a terminated crop. It is, again, a wheat. Works well. We terminated the crop and then come in and planted in it and had really good results in that as well. So we do like the cover for the value of the soil. Large rains don't compact it, but also the moisture holding capability in some of our soil throughout the season is enhanced with that. But as you see, we're not seeing the soil. So we have to be really careful on which crop protection products we use. And that's when the biotechnology in the seed really gives us the opportunity to work well in planning and using different forms for different types of applications, because we do a little bit of conventional. We do, as you see, terminated cover crop, green cover crop, strip till. We use different products all the way through, so we mitigate the risk of having anything become resistant in the way of weeds against our chemical program. So what does that toolbox look like? Well, it's all about innovation. And one of the things that we have learned over time, and we found we are really just learning, is the soil innovation. What we can learn from the soil and the life that is in that soil year-round, the microbes. That technology is evolving, and our seed innovations are a really nice complement to that as well, because the use of biotechnology, we can be very specific on what our needs are. And just as an example, in the U.S., rootworm was one of the first biotechnology traded corn. So we really were after that protection because that is $1 billion bug. But we quickly learned that we not only needed above ground, but we needed below ground. So the innovations that have been coming in the biotechnology space, in that seed innovation space, has been phenomenal. Genetics still play well. We still have to be mindful about what genetics, and that is the biotechnology can be used across many regions, but the genetics still need to be specific to the zone I live in, the zone I farm in. And so we have to picture two different approaches. One is a widely effective, but the other needs to be tailored fitted to areas. But that's the nice thing about biotechnology. It fits everywhere. Our crop protection innovations, the formulations that we can use to take care of our crop during the season, they can be pre-plant, burn downs. We can do post-planting, and we can do post-emergence applications, all for crop protection. But that becomes dependent on what type of production practice we use. We're really thankful for those opportunities to have a much broader toolbox, thanks to biotechnology, than we ever had before. The precision innovations are real. I actually, on our farm, my brother, my wife, my youngest daughter works for us. My eldest daughter owns a farm and is part of the farm. My youngest daughter went to college, come back, and she works in the precision space. What a boon for the old man standing before you to have that person you can lean on. So it's really, but the innovations that are coming there are just phenomenal. And what we can do in seed control and delivery, as well as trench closure, downforce for our no-till, the fertilizer applications, it all comes into play. The mechanical innovations just tie so closely with what we need to be able to do multiple different types of planting. You know, the methodology of our production practices are varied, as I've described. And to be able to have one planter that can go across that spectrum, you know, that innovation is immeasurable as well. But I can assure you that as we went through this from the 1980s and went from conventional to this, it was a curve. But you know, it has been very easy to be early adopters because people were very targeted in their approach, just like with the seed innovations and the biotechnology. So what I really want to show you in a bit of a metric, and this is from the National Corn Growers, and we are adhering to sustainability, and I can just assure you that all the innovations we can find across the spectrum are going to be hugely important. If you need help seeing it, the reduced soil loss per acre, this is from 1980 to 2015. This data was from Field to Market, helped us put it together as well as other researchers. We reduced by 58% the amount of soil loss per acre. And I can share with you on our highly erodible ground that type of no-till and cover crop is immeasurable in this. But that's from the period I started farming, so I can so relate to this. Was very likely a bell curve from my experience. You know, we had to get to the point that we had biotechnology to really advance this rate of change. So the 46% improved efficiency of water use. You know, largely that's going to be an irrigated number, and we have it here in Brazil. We have it in the States. It's around the world. We have some in Ohio, not as much. We don't have irrigation on our farm, but the technology, my friends that irrigate from Nebraska and other states, they say the technology there is advancing so quickly that they feel like we are really on a course that's really appropriate to maintain a trajectory of being good stewards of our water. So 41% decrease in the amount of land required to produce a bushel of corn. You know, that's land use. And in Brazil, I know there's opportunity for expansion of land, but I can tell you in the U.S., it's contraction of land. And one of the latest innovations that everyone is adhering to in this space is electrification of vehicles in the transportation fleet. We're seeing good, productive farmland being targeted for putting solar panels on. I'm not going to judge a person for making that choice. But when I look at that productive land is out of production for decades, if ever comes back. So, you know, to be able to reduce the amount of land required to produce a bushel of corn by 41% from 1980 to 2015, we need to even be better yet. And it's going to take innovations because we will have to produce more with less. You know, the 41% improved energy use efficiency per bushel in Ohio, we have to dry our corn. Our grain dryer could run on natural gas, but it burns propane, uses electric for our grain bins. You know, we have electric for our shop all winter long. You know, we do have a footprint in the electric space. But when you think about fertilizer has an energy value as well. So that comes into play. So that 41% isn't strictly the diesel fuel we burn, the gasoline we burn, the propane, the electric. It does play into the fertilizer as well. In that strip till rig you saw where it's putting banded fertilizer every 30 inches, we can reduce on some select products as much as 40%. The rate that we apply can be reduced as much as 40% and still be efficient because the roots have direct access to it. Some are only 20%. But that is another thing that comes into play here in the economics of sustainability. We all know it's a three-legged stool, and the economics is a big player in it. Social is too. We can't ignore consumers. We can't ignore the world in this space as well. So 31% reduced greenhouse gas emissions per bushel. Now, a lot of this is tied per bushel. If you recall, I said early that from the time we implemented biotechnology in our seed traits, We have increased our productivity by 25%. This is real. This can go further if we continue to use seed innovation for its full value. And I'll share with you where NCGA established their goals, and we're talking about by 2030, increase land use efficiency by 12%, soil erosion reduction by 13%, increased irrigation water use efficiency by another 15%. And as I said, my friends in Nebraska and states like that really use a lot of water, they say, we'll beat that target. We may want to bump it up. So that's a good thing. And I'll touch on that a bit in a minute, but increased energy use efficiency by 13%, reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 13%. You know, this is a journey. I started you a journey when I started farming in 1980. We're not done, nor should we ever be done. This should be a continuum. But we need that toolbox. We need that innovation to get there. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today. And we'll have a question and answer period at the end. So thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Next speaker will be Ambassador Carlos Marcio Cozendey. Ambassador will be making his presentation virtually. Ambassador, are you there?
Brazilian representative to the international economic organizations here in Paris. The main one of those organizations is the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the functions of the OECD, how the organization has been dealing with agriculture and especially biotechnology. And then at the end, just a quick review of where Brazil is in terms of its pledge to accede to the OECD as a full member. So the OECD is an organization that deals with discussing public policies in a number of different areas, and it has a very big scope of policies that are discussed by the organization. Basically, every area of public policy except maybe defense and one or culture, but all the other issues are discussed within the organization. So one first function of the organization is to produce studies and data and databases. That's on the basis of those studies and databases that the Secretariat produces that the discussions take place based on evidence. So it's fundamentally an organization which is discussing how to improve public policies on the basis of evidence. And for that, the organization does a lot of studies and data collection and so on with the cooperation of governments. Then the second function is that it is a space for intergovernmental discussions. So there are a number of committees for the different areas of public policy, and representatives from different governments then go there and on the basis of those studies and data that are produced, discuss public policies in the different areas. So one avenue is the discussion of new issues. If new problems, new challenges appear, that's where countries are going to meet to discuss that. And at the same time, it's a space for evaluation, for peer review of the different policies in different countries. And also by doing that, a country can publicize what it's doing and explain their policies that worked so that other countries can also inspire themselves and their own policies on those examples. A third function is that the OECD produces standards. So when from this discussion there is identified that there is a convergence on certain issues, normally the organization will produce a recommendation or a decision. That those standards can be the consolidation of best practices. So if everybody thinks that a certain way of doing things is the best one, it becomes a recommendation. Or it can also be a standard that establishes minimum standards of behavior for the different countries that allow international cooperation to move forward. And finally, a fourth function is that in practice, the organization defines a number of items of the international agenda, items that are going to be initially discussed at the OECD and then eventually will even become part of the discussions elsewhere. For instance, there has been always a lot of connection between the OECD and the World Trade Organization, or previous to that, the GATT, the General Agreements on Tariffs and Trade. So a number of issues would be discussed in the OECD, studied in the OECD, and then would move on to the GATT and to the WTO to become international agreements in the multilateral trade area. So how does the OECD apply those four functions, for instance, in the biotechnology area, which is the one we are discussing here today? So in terms of studies and data, there is a lot of studies that are done in that area, but specifically there are in the working groups that discuss those issues, the production of what they call consensus documents, which are documents that culture by culture provide for the basic data and the basic descriptions of the biology of the different species, so that this can be a useful resource for regulators when they examine different innovations which are, in terms of biotechnology, which are presented to them. There are around 60 documents, 60 consensus documents now for different cultures, and that is a kind of a repository of knowledge, of a consensus knowledge among regulators in that area. The organization also maintains what's called the BioTrack database, which is a database which includes 366 products of bioengineered cultures, which is again an information base for regulators to get information on what is there on the market and help them when they do their risk assessments and their evaluation of new cultures. In terms of intergovernmental discussions, there are three main fora that discuss biotechnology at the OECD. You have the Working Party on the Harmonization of Regulatory Oversight in Biotechnology, the Working Party for the Safety of Novel Foods and Feed, and in a more technological dimension, the Working Party on the Biotechnology, Nanotechnology, and Convergent Technologies. So all those three fora work, as I mentioned, as the place where policymakers meet and can discuss how they're, on one side, on the innovation side, what are the policies to promote innovation in that area, and on the other side, in terms of the regulators that exchange their experience and their methods of work to improve the public policy in that area. There is one, this is an area that has been working more on the basis of studies, database, and cooperation. So it has not had a more normative approach. So there's only one recommendation in the area, which is the recommendation on human biobanks and genetic research databases, which is a general instrument that provides guidelines for regulators when they establish nationally what are the requirements for that kind of databases. So, so the organization is approaching innovation in agriculture in general by multiple examinations, multiple studies. They have those specific for dedicated to biotechnology with a regulator, policymaker perspective. So it's not an organization which is producing the innovation, but it's trying to create and help to create the necessary legislative frameworks in the different countries, in the institutional frameworks in the different countries, on one side to allow those new innovations to happen, on the other side to allow that the necessary regulation is provided for. I think the agriculture discussions in the OECD in the last years have in a way moved from a more economic perspective, examining specifically what would be the agricultural policy. They still do that, and there are very important discussions on economic instruments and on trade and other aspects of economic regulation of agriculture. But more and more, there are discussions on sustainability of agriculture and the relationship between the different areas, not only within agriculture itself, how to to have a more sustainable agriculture, but also the impact that agriculture has on different biomes. If you take, for instance, and I am moving to that part now, the process of accession of Brazil to the OECD. As you know, Brazil has asked to become part of this big exercise of policy improvement by becoming a full member of the OECD. And this request was made in 2017. Members took some time, in fact 4 years, to be able to agree on how this would proceed, because there were 6 candidates. Finally, in January this year, those candidates were accepted to start the accession process. Now, the phase where we are is that the Council of the OECD approved the roadmap for the accession of those countries. This roadmap establishes the different committees that are going to examine the public policies of the candidate countries. Of course, the Agriculture Committee will be one that will examine. The Chemicals and Biotechnology Committee also will examine the policies of the candidate countries. And within for each committee, the Council has approved what are the core principles, with the basic criteria that are going to be examined to see whether the policies and the legislation of each candidate country is convergent with those of the countries which are already members of the OECD. So the OECD functions as a club of good practices. So it's necessary that a country that comes in as a new member has a certain degree of convergence with those which are already there, in order to allow the discussions to flow with more productivity and in a more positive way. So the accession process is made of these examinations of policies in different areas. In the agriculture area, one novelty in terms of the criteria that are going to be examined is exactly the sustainability one, which was not present in previous criteria for the Agriculture Committee. So previously it was more concentrated on examining what kind of agriculture policy that country adopted. Now it also includes the sustainability dimensions of agriculture and of the impact of agriculture, including in terms of the impact of agriculture in other biomes like forests and so on. So that's a general picture of what the OECD does in this area, in specific area of biotechnology and agriculture sustainability in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. We are aware that you won't be on the question and answer part of this presentation. Is there any message you want to leave to the floor?
Is that, as the previous presenter, John, mentioned, agriculture is now basically innovation, and is basically sustainability. And those two aspects are very important in the OECD and in the OECD process of accession. I think Brazil is generally well prepared for that, both in the area of innovation in agriculture and in the area of sustainable agriculture. But of course, as we know, there are difficulties in relation, for instance, to deforestation in certain areas, and we'll have to deal with that during the accession process.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Okay, we're continuing with Othon. Othon, all yours.
I'd like to thank all the organizers. Thank you for the invitation. It's such a great opportunity to be here in this sustainable journey in Brazil. Thanks for being the moderator, by the way, and thank you, the colleagues here, John. Thank you. So, by the way, let's start our journey. We are going to look back in the last 40 years in Brazil, right? So the beans production, the grain production has been increasing five-fold, 5 times. So we only explored 71% of our productive land. And if we look a little closer here, Just bear in mind, you don't have to focus on each number here, but if you look at the distribution, it's actually very fair. You have a bit for soybeans, a bit for corn and cotton, and this is due to the fact that John has already mentioned here today. John spoke about the production journey, and it was by chance. We didn't even make an agreement or talked about it. No, it happened by chance. But we have had an improvement in regards to nutrition, to soil fertility, and also genoplasm and the adaptation of germplasm, also lower erosion rate. So all these aspects, when we sum them up, when we, adding them up, they represent very positive results. And if you look at the curve started increasing quite significantly around the 2000. So we had the CTN bill, which was passed in Brazil, and I think this had a lot impact. Also, the agribusiness in Brazil has been very successful, but I think the main product that was impacted was the corn. So in the 90s, we used to have a safrinha corn, which was a corn that we used to grow in the beginning of the crop. So we would get the seed and we would use these seeds. So this was a small production. We only used this production to pay for the expenses. But in order to explore the production potential, we had these corn started playing a much more important role, and we started calling this corn the second harvest corn or second crop. You see, the importance of this corn has increased quite significantly as opposed to the past, and we have had a better control of with pesticides. So anyway, when we were able to overcome such hurdles, and we were able to have biotechnology in our side and also use these tools in our favor, we started having a kind of corn that was very resistant, very strong, and it started yielding results. So I would even say that technology has changed the corn production scenario, and it has also opened doors to other commodities such as soybeans, cotton, so that this corn could be used in other ways and also increase production. If you look at the third curve represents the third season. So we had shorter cycles, which allowed the weed control, and also it has been quite important to us this third season. We started also planting and growing other products. So this could not be possible if it weren't for the biotechnology and if it weren't for the biosafety committee. And the biosafety committee is a multicultural committee. I'm not going to deep dive into the regulations, but they work in 3 pillars, 4 pillars. They work in the environmental pillar, in the animal pillar, a human development pillar. So there are regulatory aspects as well. So we've been consistently trying to have materials approved, and this committee has a great quality. This community is made up of scientists that are very active, and the art of science is practiced in this institution. So each leader can only have three terms, and so there is they take turns, and there is science innovation involved. There are so many aspects involved, so we constantly have the norms updated. So we have the regulatory institutions that may take longer to keep up with science, but this committee doesn't. They are very updated, and they keep up with the changes. We also work with animals, microorganisms. However, we need to sell plants. At the beginning, we focused much more on growing and planting. But as you can see here on the graphic, each color represents a different commodity. So yellow represents corn. You see the peak that it reaches because of biotechnology. But this took a long time to get the right approvals and to get the laws approved. You see, so the more familiar you get, the better it is. So the characteristics, the genetics, you see that the curves, they change according to the efficiency, according to the evidences, and according to the consensus. So they become agile, they become more efficient. So when we submit that to the committee, we have different, of course, performances according to the commodities. We have eucalyptus, sugarcane that is genetically modified, and the last one is the wheat. So the wheat was the last one to be in the pipeline. And usually when we have a different species, we face a lot of problems. So a lot of things must be taken into account. We have usually during a public hearing, we have more than half of the plants approved by the Brazilian government, but we need to lower this rate.
We have some vaccines during COVID to control COVID and other veterinary and human diseases. So just to speak briefly, as CTNBio started working, and we started assessing different species and different events. And nowadays, the scenario that we have is that 98% of the soybean planted in Brazil is genetically modified soybean. Especially, we have the traits of resistance to insects and tolerance to herbicide. But for corn, 95%, it's an extremely high adoption rate. So farmers are realizing the benefits of the use of biotechnology. And in cotton, we have an 80% adoption rate, both for cotton, soybean and meal. The main characteristics are resistance to insects and tolerance to herbicides. But some others, we have soybean approved with a tolerance to droughts, and these characteristics will be expanded in the near future. To give you a global idea of GMOs, planted in the world, because it's not just us who plant them. We have around 40% of the GMO soybean produced here. Brazil is one of the biggest producers and exporters of soybean. Around 25 and 30% of the corn is genetically modified, is planted here in Brazil. And in cotton, we have around 5% of genetically modified cotton, and we don't have canola being planted here. So it is not just a Brazilian event using biotechnology. Major grain producing and commodity producing countries have been adopting it. The U.S. is the first producer with more than 71 million hectares, and Brazil has 56, which is a little more than half of what we plant today. And here, just to divide our planted area, which is 56 million hectares, 37 of GMO soybean, 17 million of maize, and 1.2 hectares of cotton and sugarcane. The first year was something around 8,000 hectares, and the second year 18,000, and now the third year 37,000. We have exponential growth in sugarcane, especially sugarcane resistant to insects. So you see a very good acceptance of farmers. So biotech in agriculture is not only transgenic. So we have been adopting biotechnology in the identification of markers for improvement, in the choice of good parents and good characteristics and resistance to diseases, the use of mutation methods, radioactive, or the use of chemicals. We have the application of tissue crops like strawberries, bananas, and eucalyptus. The reproduction techniques are very well used. And the transgenics, which was what I was presenting until now. And now we have the use of genomic editing, which is the frontier of technology. That is also, we have products. CT and Bio is one of the pioneers in the implementation of standards to assess and approve these materials, in line with some countries like Argentina, Australia, and the EU. They are having a public hearing to see how to implement these products. So biotechnology is a set of techniques that work with a bio, and that we have been using this for a very long time, and always with benefits of increasing productivity and improving the characteristics that may be both nutritional or appearance or organoleptic characteristics. And here we had a study, we carried out a study 4 years ago, which was a very depth study together with AgroConsult, isolating the aspect of the use of biotechnology and which aspects it brought in terms of in the environmental aspects of reduction in the use of products to produce the use of crop production products. There were a reduction of more than 800 tons in 20 years, a reduction in fuel use. We tend to do less spraying operations, so we have a reduction of 377 million liters of fuel, the use of water and the carbon emissions. It was a very interesting study that is available on CropLife's website. And it also brings economic aspects of these 20 years of adoption, both in terms of productivity and return to farmers and the profit to the daily economy. And it's worth taking a look and showing also the direct benefits to farmers. If you observe in soybean and cotton crops, which is around 12 to 13%, an increase of 12, 13% in the profit of these crops. Sometimes this is the margin that the farmer has, depending on the year. Just using biotech, you can have the benefit of what it would be your margin. If your margin is good, if it gets better with biotech. And in In the shorter column, which is the winter corn, which is now called, we used to be called safrinha crop and is now called second crop. It shows why the second crop has become more prominent nowadays. It represents 30% of our corn production, and the return for farmers who use biotech in the corn varieties is really 124% more profit in the production, in a production that takes 4 to 5 years. I don't know any return better than this. So this justifies the wide adoption and the transformation of the second crop corn into the main crop. In a study that was published in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, they reached this ratio in countries. A developing country, for each dollar invested in biotech, the farmer got a return of over $4, and in developed countries, for each dollar invested, they got a little more than $3 in return. So mathematically, we also show this study in our homepage, and it's interesting to see that there's direct relationship for farmers. In addition to have greater output, more stable supply in the market. You also have direct returns to farmers, and which is why they adopted it. This is showing what the future holds for us in terms of biotech. In addition to the use of more focused on health, using plants as biofactories, we will be able to fight climate change, the effects of climate change that not only involve the rising temperatures, but bring more diseases and pests that enable the different pests. You have more transit of products in the world. We have received Asian rust, and the trend is that we'll have an increasing number of contaminations and infestations and attacks of pests and diseases, and probably technology will be a rapid response to this kind of threat in agriculture. In addition to using the plants as biofactories of producing products that can bring benefits to both human, animal, and environmental health, using plants as factors for environmental treatment. That's what I had to say. I am here available and ready for the question and answer session. Thank you.
You tell us about this dynamic history. This is not a picture, this is a movie. What can you say about that?
Well, I really appreciate that question, because when we think about food security for the world, there's a lot of policies established around the production of agriculture, corn in specific, dear to me. I can share with you that we began talking about conservation and some of the conservation tillage, some of the practices, some of the grass seedings that were left out of production to manage rainfall, not current streams, just managing the field so that when we got those big events. But then we kind of moved into the sustainability piece, and sustainability became many things and became really difficult to define. So as we move forward from that, before we ever really fully defined sustainability, now we're talking about regenerative ag. And that's very common in the U.S. I don't know how much you talk about your regenerative ag here in Brazil, but it feels like every step someone is trying to say that's where you need to be. That's your end game. That's where we want you to land. But I showed you that this is a work in progress. This is a journey. So whatever term we decide to define, the place we need to be is really just on the right path, and it's not going to be an end game. It is a continuum for here forward for as long as my kids can farm. And so I just want everyone to think about that as we move forward. It is a movie. It's not a picture. we can take a snapshot, but this is a long game, and this really doesn't have to end. It can end really well because we can feed the world through our agriculture, and corn is magical, if you will. It has such wonderful properties that it's used in 4,000 products, but largely it is the starch that's used. In the world's short of protein, most everything we do, we land the protein back into the marketplace to produce meat protein and many other things.
My suit is made of corn.
Yes, this suit, it's wonderful. I really need one. It's made from cornstarch, one of the 4,000 products. So,
and John, it reminds me a speech that says, "When I found all the answers, the questions had changed." You know.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Othon. Othon, I wanna ask you, what about public acceptance? I know that here in Brazil, there's been a survey asking about public acceptance on wheat. What can you tell us about that?
Muito bom, Pedro.
That's a very
Bom,
good
durante
question,
esse
Pedro.
processo
During this process of approval of wheat, we had a public hearing at CTNBio. Some sectors, wheat had been received a conditional approval in Argentina, waiting for approval in Brazil to start to be planted in Argentina. And some organizations were opposing the approval with a fear that this would generate a trade problem and acceptance of consumers of transgenic products in bread and cookies. In April and early May, one of the associations that opposed this made a survey with consumers. They were very responsible. They decided to do a survey, and the answer of consumers is that more than 71% of consumers said they do not worry about using transgenic wheat in products that they will consume on a daily basis. They don't want a scarcity, and they want this product is assessed in terms of safety. They feel confident to consume it. They will not oppose. So this resistance has to do with history of use. We have been using biotechnology for over 20 years without any problems in terms of consumption. The result in terms of price and supply of products, I think consumers have a more favorable vision of biotech. There are many labeled products in the market showing, clearly stating that they are made using transgenic corn and soybean, and consumers do not show any resistance. On the opposite, they are affordable, they have a good quality. This is a good sign, I think, for biotechnology that has a history of lack of information and negative propaganda. And I think the history shows that it has broken
Seems
this
like
barrier.
consumers are getting aware that biotechnology is taking care of the environment.
Sim,
Yes, and at the end, consumers and common citizens, they want food at their table at an affordable price and with a history of safe use. There are no more reasons to mistrust. What you have to question is the information that comes with the opposite sign. So this survey, this industry changed its position. The association changed its opinion of opposing the approval, and now they no longer oppose the approval of genetically modified
Thank you very much, Othon. John, we are arriving to the end of this panel. I want you to leave the last message that you want to leave to the people here. What would that be? And then with you, Othon, as well.
Well, I thank you for that opportunity. And I would say that biotechnology is to be embraced. We've got so much innovation today, but where we're heading is almost unfathomable in real terms where we can go, because the genome is amazing, But when you think about how we can be advancing the plant breeding as in real terms and still be defined as 100% corn, it's just amazing to think that we can change a trajectory, and we've got so many great places to go to feed the world and provide fuel. And I just think that 100% right, the sustainability is it's so dependent on innovation, and seed technology is a big part of that innovation. So do appreciate that.
Your turn, Othon.
Bom, obrigado, Pedro, pela moderação. Eu acho que a mensagem final.
Thank you, Peter, for mediating this talk. I think that technology is not a solution for everything in agriculture, but it's a tool, and it's a fundamental tool, it's an essential tool, and it also provides farmers resources that they can rely on, and they can fight climate change. We have just overcome a pandemic. However, the day before yesterday, we have already discovered another disease that could represent a new pandemic. Anyway, so technology for sure will help us overcome these hurdles and setbacks, and we need to be open to technology, and we need to be open to innovations. So this is what is going to make mankind here in this planet.
As we've seen, technology is part of the solution of our problems, and that should be the end of this panel. Thank you very much to you all.